Our story begins on the hidden away ancient Jedi planet of Ahch-To, as Rey has just left the cave of darkness that has been calling to her since she arrived on this planet. She was learning the Force from Luke, but he still carried a great reservation about training her. He was afraid of something, or perhaps of someone, and in the cave of darkness, Rey did not find the answers she was looking for. More than anything, she wanted to find out who her parents were, or where they had gone off to, but all Rey saw in this cave was herself. She had never felt more alone, and as she returned to the hut here and sat down to think about everything went quiet as the Force now bridged the minds between Rey and Kylo Ren. This was happening more and more, and neither of them were doing it on purpose, but both of them were becoming much more accepting of it. Both Kylo Ren and Rey felt very alone, like they didn't just know where to go next in life, and when they were with each other like this, things were just easier. So as Rey sat in the hut, she could see Kylo out in the galaxy, aboard Snoke's ship in the First Order fleet. And when Rey told Ben how she felt, Ben assured her that she is not alone. Rey looked up at him, and she could tell that Ben was still being torn apart from killing his own father. It was something he thought would bring him permanently into the darkness, but instead, it only made Ben remember more of who he was so long ago. Rey could see in his eyes just how desperate he was for someone to be with him, and so she told Ben that he is not alone either. And on Ahch-To, in the distant huts, Luke Skywalker felt a disturbance in the Force. He'd recently begun to open himself back up to the Force, and now something felt terribly wrong. Luke felt a presence that he had not felt since, and he began to run, calling out for Rey. And Rey kept her eye contact hold with Ben, telling him it's not too late, and she saw a sudden flicker of hope, sadness, flashing in Ben's eyes as Rey began to lift her hand up to try and touch Ben's hand. In this moment, Ben was more vulnerable than ever. It was a miracle of the Force that the two of them could even see each other like this, and Ben reached forward for her hand, wanting to know if they truly could bridge this gap across the galaxy. And as their hands touched, Rey acted on pure instinct. Her fingers wrapped around Ben's hand, and with all of her strength, she suddenly pulled him. Ben flew forward, but he didn't land on the cold floor of Snoke's ship. Instead, he flew and landed right on top of Rey. He awkwardly rolled off, then he grabbed his lightsaber in confusion, putting on a brave face as Kylo suddenly ignited the crackling blade, as he told Rey she should never have brought him here. There was no way to get back, though. He was stuck. Ben looked around the hut, when suddenly the door was bursted open, and at the entrance stood Luke Skywalker, the man Ben blamed for his fall into the darkness. Luke looked on in a mixture of emotions, with shock, confusion, sadness, and betrayal at the forefront, as he asked Rey why she would bring him here. Kylo waved his lightsaber around, saying that it's time he stop hiding from the galaxy, from him. Luke didn't know what to say. The last time he and Ben saw each other, Luke had reached into Ben's mind, and he saw awful, terrible darkness in him. For the split second, Luke thought to end it, but that feeling had gone away so quickly. Luke remembered that moment nearly every day, as it was yet another moment where he couldn't control the darkness that had controlled their entire family for years. His father was Anakin Skywalker, turned Darth Vader, the most feared man in the galaxy, and Luke was the one who brought Vader back, but he would always have some of Anakin's darkness. When Vader brought up Leia in that moment on the Death Star, Luke had lost it. He nearly killed his father in anger. He nearly lost himself to the darkness. He would always have this darkness, and the challenge was choosing not to act on it. And with Ben, Luke was never going to act on that darkness that he felt. But Ben did not know that. The boy was protecting himself, and when Luke awoke from Ben's attack, his entire Jedi temple had been burnt down. So Luke decided to leave, not to hide from Ben, Snoke, or anyone else, but to hide from himself and the darkness inside of him. As he was recalling all of this in this moment, Ben moved forward, waving his lightsaber around again, and he yelled to Luke that he is going to destroy him. Rey got up and tried to hold Ben back, as his anger was rising quickly, but Ben used the Force, throwing Rey hard into the wall. She was dazed, and her head was spinning, as she barely watched Kylo, now moving in at Luke. Kylo swung for Luke's head, and Luke ducked before rolling out into the open clearing with the rain pouring down hard on him. The constant droplets were hitting Kylo's lightsaber. Steam was coming off his blade, as Luke tried to say he was sorry. Luke could feel something here. There was a spark of light behind all of the darkness, and Luke yelled that he can feel that Ben knows this is the wrong path. It's not too late. And Kylo turned his head away, yelling back that he killed the light, just like he killed Han Solo. Luke scoffed, saying that he could feel killing Han only tore him apart even more. Kylo shook his head. He had enough of this. He'd been waiting years to finally kill Luke Skywalker and prove to Snoke that he is worthy. He moved back in, swinging to kill Luke, but suddenly Luke was holding his blue blade in his hand as he blocked Kylo's strike, then spun away to block a strike behind him as he told Ben once more that he is sorry. Ben couldn't take this. He turned away in anger, yelling at Luke that he doesn't understand. It's not just Han. He helped to kill Leia, too. Ben thought that Leia died when the First Order fighters blew up the bridge with Akbar and the others. He didn't know that Leia was still alive, but Luke did. Luke could feel her presence in the Force, and it was brighter than the brightest star in the galaxy. So, Luke lowered his blade, and he told Ben he is wrong. His mother is still alive. Ben looked at Luke with disbelief, but also so much hope that Luke could be telling the truth. Ben said that he saw it happen. She can't be alive. And Luke took a deep breath, reaching his hand out, and he told Ben he will show him. And Ben reluctantly reached out. He grabbed Luke's hand, and they sat down together in the rain. Luke told Ben to just breathe, forget everything, and focus only on his mother. Ben complied, wanting desperately for her to still be alive, and as Luke and Ben suddenly were sitting together with the Force around them, Rey was able to wake up and walk out to see them. It was the Master and the Apprentice, just like it always should have been, and Rey closed her eyes as well as they reached out across the stars. In her medical capsule, Leia could feel them through the Force, and she smiled to herself. Then she simply told Ben that it's time to come home. The connection broke, and Ben had a tear rolling down his cheek, mixing with the rain. The light was quickly returning to Ben, and Luke could feel it, but he still feared his own influence over Ben and over Rey and the entire galaxy. He looked to the both of them, then said they must go back to their fleet, help Leia, help the Resistance. Rey asked what Luke was going to do, and Luke shook his head to say that he can't help with the galaxy. His time is over. Luke turned away, and he began walking up the stairs, worried that if he hung around any longer, Ben may change his mind. Rey and Ben were suddenly alone in the rain, and neither of them wanted to leave without Luke. They needed him in order to take on Snoke. But as Rey was about to chase after him, Ben held up his hand. He felt someone, a presence he recognized from the Force, and he told Rey that Luke may come back to them very soon. Luke reached a platform atop the long stairs, and he sat down away from the rain, hoping to see the Falcon just fly off to go help Leia, when suddenly a calm voice spoke from behind him, telling Luke he's always been able to see the light even when the dark is at its strongest. Luke recognized this voice well by now. It was his father, and Luke turned to say that he failed Ben once before. He can't let it happen again. Ben is on the right path, but he is unstable, and Anakin said that's exactly why he needs Luke to help stabilize him in the light. Luke said he is afraid of what Ben can become, afraid of what he can become, and Anakin told Luke that is the same fear that he held on Bespin, on Endor, and on the Death Star. What changed? Luke looked up at the stars, recalling those days. They were simpler times in many ways, and he told Anakin that he was naive then. He didn't understand the Jedi, the Sith, the Force, any of it. And now, the weight of the galaxy was on his shoulders to be Luke Skywalker, a legend. But Anakin told Luke that Ben and Rey don't need a legend, they just need a guide to show them that the light is always there, just like Luke did with Vader. And Luke looked to his father, closing his eyes. Down near the waves of the water, Rey and Ben were going to the Millennium Falcon together. Ben was still confused about his place in all of this, but ultimately, he knew it was time to choose a path, and he was choosing Rey and his family over Snoke. As they reached the Falcon, Ben heard a sudden angry roar, and he held his hands up as Chewie ran over to slam his fists into Ben, get revenge for Han. But as Chewie lifted his fists, he looked down, and he saw the boy that he watched grow up. Ben was lost. confused, desperately in need of his friend Chewbacca. So, Chewie did what Han would have wanted, lowering his arms into a hug, and it felt like he was with Han once more. Chewie missed Han more than he could ever express, and he would always love Ben. So as he now learned that Ben was coming back to them, it was one of the happier moments of his very long life. And they boarded the Falcon, and as the ramp closed, Luke called out telling them to wait, and all four of Ben, Rey, Chewbacca, and R2-D2 were so glad to see him. Luke still had a bit of a brooding attitude, but he gave Chewie a wink to let him know that he was back. And Luke would stand in the back of the cockpit as Ben and Chewie sat next to each other. Luke was reminded of his first time in this ship so long ago, and he truly remembered Han as the ship jumped to hyperspace to take on the First Order. Out in the galaxy, the First Order fleet was still chasing down the Resistance as they were running low on fuel reserves, and Snoke felt a great disturbance in the Force that only increased as he called Kylo Ren back to his chambers with no response. In fact, Kylo was nowhere to be found, and Snoke began to wonder if the girl Rey had somehow taken him. Snoke could feel their connection in the Force as a dyad, and he'd worked to help bridge their minds, but he wondered now if he'd gone too far. Had Rey truly found a way to take him? Could she turn him? Snoke knew Kylo was weak in the darkness, and he was contemplating this. Everything now suddenly changed. Admiral Holdo jumped to hyperspace through the entire First Order fleet, piercing through the capital ships along with the surrounding ships, and this gave the Resistance just enough time to fly down to Crate safely. When Snoke eventually woke up from the impact, everything was destroyed, aside from the ships and military ground units, to launch an invasion on Crate, and Snoke wasted zero time getting everyone to the ground. He would personally wipe out the Resistance. And down on Crate, Leia, Poe, Finn, Rose, and the remaining Resistance fighters were on their last bits of hope. They called out to the galaxy for help, but they found that no one was coming. Hope had run out in the galaxy, and outside of the unbreakable gate here on Crate, a loud creaking and snapping sound could be heard. The First Order wasn't using any special cannon to break down the door. Instead, Snoke stood at the front of his army, and he was reaching out with both hands to rip the giant door down himself. The Resistance stood ready with their weapons, but Hope was not out yet. From the sky suddenly came the Millennium Falcon, firing down on Snoke's position. Snoke barely dodged the blaster fire, and from the Falcon ramp jumped Luke and Ben, landing on the ground and igniting their sabers together. Ben was holding a blue lightsaber instead of his red one. It was Leia's lightsaber, and as the two of them stood in front of Snoke, Rey and Chewie kept flying the Falcon around, destroying TIE fighters, searching for a back exit to help with evacuation. Snoke stared at both of them, then flicked his hand to pull Ben's red saber from his robes, and Snoke ignited it before telling both of them that the Jedi and the name Skywalker will die today. Snoke could not contain his rage, and he swung down on the two of them. White salt sprayed into the air with each powerful strike, revealing the streaks of the red ground beneath. Snoke fought with a brutal, deliberate anger, saber arcing in wide sweeps as he unleashed powerful strikes upon Luke and Ben. Each clash sent waves through the air, rippling the force around them, and Luke parried, but the ferocity of Snoke's attacks drove him backwards. The Jedi gritted his teeth, sweat on his brow as he struggled to hold his ground against this sheer power and speed of the Dark Master, as Luke was still shaking off the rust from his exile. Ben now moved in to help, but Snoke anticipated every move here as well, twisting his body, using the crossguards of his saber to deflect Ben's swings. With a surge of lightning, Snoke unleashed a telekinetic wave, throwing both Luke and Ben backwards into the rocks. Luke groaned as he pulled himself to his feet. Breathing was ragged. Ben scrambled back to his knees, gripping Leia's saber, frustration evident in his wild, now erratic movements. Their attacks were uncoordinated. Snoke was easily exploiting the gaps in their teamwork to maintain his upper hand. He fired more lightning hard into Ben, slamming him into the giant door, and he told Luke that the Jedi teachings will always fall short. But Luke held up his blade again, and he remembered facing down Vader when he was only a boy with so little experience. He was now the master, and he waited for Ben to get back to his side, and Luke decided he would adapt his style to blend with Ben in this fight. Snoke contorted his face to hide his sudden fear as he felt this shift, and now Luke and Ben began to adapt, their fighting styles slowly aligning. Luke's measured defensive approach was complementing Ben's raw power and aggression as he stayed in the light. They were moving as one, Ben distracting Snoke with relentless strikes while Luke targeted the new openings. The air shimmered with energy as Snoke lashed out, blade spinning for the kills, but the true master and apprentice began to predict his moves, their connection through the Force growing stronger. Snoke's saber scraped against Leia's blade in a flurry of sparks as Ben forced him back, and Luke now surged forward with a clean, decisive slash, cutting right through Snoke's abdomen. He gasped in shock, and the last thing Snoke would see was two of the last Jedi standing together as one. And aboard the huge ATM-6s that just watched this duel, General Hux watched the Supreme Leader die, and after just a moment of pure panic, his own leadership instincts kicked in as he ordered the ATM-6s to fire on the Jedi. Luke and Ben saw this, and Luke told Ben to get that wall down now or they're both dead. So Ben turned to the wall, and Luke turned to the walkers, holding up his hands, creating a huge force shield like never before, using most of his power, and the walkers fired everything they had. Ben called upon all of his power to break a hole in this wall, and Luke barely held off the fire long enough for them to get inside, run through the base, and get to the Falcon, as Rey helped with the full evacuation. And as the Resistance left Crate, there was a true shift in the Force, as the First Order was shattered without both Snoke and Kylo Ren. Luke, Ben, and Rey would reunite with Leia, Poe, Finn, and the rest of the Resistance, and Leia was overjoyed to have Luke and Ben back in her life. The other Resistance fighters were, obviously, hesitant to embrace Ben as being part on their side, but Ben had a way to show everyone that he can be trusted. As the Resistance landed on the new planet Asian Kloss, the new home base, Ben and Finn would get together, while Luke was out training Rey in the ways of the Force. And Ben told Finn that he can be an inspiration to the rest of the First Order. The entire army of stormtroopers is composed of people who've been brainwashed to think of the First Order as their only path in life. But together, Ben and Finn knew they could convince the stormtroopers that there was another way. And the two of them would speak to Luke, Leia, Rey, Chewie, and they would decide on a plan. Ben knew exactly where to go to speak to the entire First Order army, as it was a planet that the First Order planned to take over and establish a new base, Naboo. So the elite squad of Luke, Leia, Ben, Rey, Finn, Poe, and Chewbacca would get aboard the Millennium Falcon, and they would jump to hyperspace for Naboo. The First Order was still in recovery mode when the Falcon arrived, and they were able to slip through space unnoticed, as Hux had taken the role of Supreme Leader and was trying to politically fight off anyone else trying to claim the title, of which there were many. The Falcon would enter Naboo's atmosphere, and Luke would guide them to a safe landing spot, away from everything. It was out on the edge of the city, and as the group exited the Falcon, Luke, Chewie, and Leia would stay back, as they didn't want too big of a group going in. And so, as Poe, Finn, Rey, and Ben left, Luke and Leia would enter a royal area, both of them putting their hands on the tomb of Padme Amidala, their mother. Both of them could feel that Anakin was here with them, as the entire family just stood in peace, trusting Ben and Rey to help lead the galaxy to peace. And as the other four ran through the city, Poe and Rey would use explosives to blow up a nearby weapons depot, causing a distraction as Poe got into a TIE fighter and Rey ignited her lightsaber to fight off security troopers, while Ben and Finn entered the communications room. Luckily, Ben's secure code to access the First Order army was not yet removed, and Ben plugged himself into the console, sending a message out to every single trooper in the First Order. He and Finn stood together, and the two of them would tell everyone in the army that they have a choice in this life. They can continue fighting for this horrible First Order, taking the lives of innocents, or they can make the same choice that Ben and Finn made, the choice to take their lives back and fight for what is right. They would talk for a while longer, motivating the troopers, and soon it would begin to work. The transmission echoed across the galaxy, a voice carried through the void into the hearts and minds of First Order stormtroopers, stationed on every planet and every starship. The faint hum of machinery on Bracca's scrapyards would fall silent as troopers gathered, helmets tilted toward the communication screens. The words of Ben and Finn pierced the air, challenging the troopers to see beyond their programming, seize the freedom they never thought they could have. Kylo Ren himself had turned to the other side. A ripple of uncertainty spread as one trooper lifted their blaster, firing on the commanding officer, demanding they get back to work. Others followed, and Bracca erupted in rebellion. On Coruscant, groups of troopers hesitated at their posts, weapons lowering as they gazed at each other. grappling with these messages that they could choose another path. And soon, the streets would become chaotic, with stormtroopers leading citizens in a fight against the oppressive First Order that was scattered across the planet. And on Bespin, the floating city trembled as explosions rocked the central refinery, where loyalist officers fought to suppress this uprising. Amid the chaos, stormtroopers ripped off their helmets, faces reflecting a mix of relief and determination, as they worked side by side with miners, sabotaging machinery. And on massive First Order Star Destroyers, they all began to fall one by one as the defectors took control, redirecting the ships to neutral systems or simply abandoning them in space to be destroyed. And of course, here on Naboo, where the elite resistance squad resided, they watched as the uprising began, and the Stormtrooper Rebellion would bring down the First Order, with Hux dying here. Within days, the Stormtroopers would be leading citizens on countless planets to fight back, and the First Order was just scraps of an order, as the galaxy united behind Luke, Leia, Rey, Ben, and the Resistance, as they found their way to peace. As for Darth Sidious, Ben, Luke, and Rey would feel his presence in the Force, and they would use the Mustafar Wayfinder to find Sidious in his extremely weak form, and he would be destroyed before he could take advantage of the Force dyad between Ben and Rey. The entire fleet would be destroyed on Exegol, as it was too weak to be sustained without Sidious, and Luke, with all of the Jedi by his side, would ensure the true destruction of the Sith once and for all. The war was over, and in the void of the First Order, Leia would do her best to try and build the Resistance into some sort of government, but she would be more of a guide, as the citizens of the galaxy were building a free galaxy together once more. The Jedi would be a key part of a rebuilding galaxy, and the New Order would be led mainly by Rey, as Luke was like a guide like Leia, while Ben was still going through the process of finding himself once more after coming back to the light. His sins in the dark could never be truly forgotten, but like Vader before him, he found redemption when it mattered most, and years would go by with him and Rey forming a deeper, more romantic connection. The Resistance army would be led by Poe and Finn together, plus Chewie of course, with the Jedi by their side, and Luke and Leia would eventually pass into the Force with the galaxy in the hands of their greatest students. And folks, that is our story for today. A bit of a partnership with PPSW, Penny Patrol Star Wars. Great friend. Love that guy. Yeah, we both did. I don't know what his story looks like. I didn't read it, but we both did a similar concept. Just Rey's going to Ben and his. So yeah, hope that one was good. Probably a darker ending. I don't know for sure, but yeah, love working with him. Just good stuff. Let me know what you guys thought. Sequel stories are rare, more rare than anything else, really. More rare than, well, what's more rare on this channel, a dark side ending or a sequel story? Probably a sequel story. Anyways, I know you guys all love the sequels. I actually do enjoy them quite a bit. Don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone. Anyways, subscribe to the channel. Leave a like on this video. Thanks. And I'll see you in the next video.